guys, welcome back. I'm Laura, I'm a hairstylist, and today I'm gonna answer some of your top questions regarding high lift hair color. So I recently did 2 separate videos where I colored my hair with high lift. The first one, I brought out my roots that were significantly grown out, and then the second one was the touch-up where I covered my roots after they had grown out just a little bit, as well as pulled the color down to cover up any more of that residual warmth that was left over. And in each of those videos, you guys had some questions and some comments for me, and I realized that I never really made a video where I fully explained what high lift color is and how it's different from bleach as well as traditional color. So today I'm taking your top questions and answering them so that you have a general idea of how high lift works. Okay, so the first one is, can I use high lift to remove hair color? And when I say remove, I mean lighten. Can you use high lift to lighten out hair color instead of bleach? The answer to this question is unfortunately no, you can't. This is because permanent color molecules are deposited deep into the cortex of your hair. This is essentially why we call permanent color permanent. It's not because it doesn't fade out of the hair, but it's because it's permanently altering the chemical composition of the hair. The only thing that will remove them is bleach, because bleach is a stripping agent and it goes in and literally removes the color from the hair. Now, if you have used a demi-permanent color or a semi-permanent color, this area starts to get a little bit more gray. I have found personally that this is dependent on the demi-permanent or semi-permanent color. Personally, on my hair, I have been able to lighten through demi-permanent color with high lift, but I want to say that this isn't necessarily supposed to work like this. So it really just depends on the demi-permanent and how much those color molecules have embedded themselves into the cortex of the hair. If you're in this boat, I suggest doing a test strand underneath just to see what happens and if the color budges or not. Okay, the second question is, can you mix regular hair color into high lift hair color? The reason you might do this is so you can change the tone of the high lift. Maybe the high lift brand that you're working with doesn't have the exact tones that you want, so you want to customize and create your own. And while I love the idea of customizing your color and creating your own, unfortunately you shouldn't mix high lift with traditional color. The reason for this is because the traditional color does not have as much ammonia in it as high lift does. So the more traditional color that you're putting into the high lift, you're actually going to be decreasing the lifting power. Another way to put it is you're diluting the high lift, so it's not gonna lift as well if it has the regular color in it. Now, you can intermix different high lift colors together, but I personally wouldn't recommend mixing in a regular color with a high lift. What I recommend doing instead, if your high lift brand doesn't come in the shades that you're looking for, is to lift the hair with high lift and then go back and tone the hair to the shade that you want. And I will talk a little bit more about toning the hair afterwards in just a bit. Okay, so number 3 is, you did this wrong, you're supposed to add a booster. You gotta love the comment section on the internet, right? Okay, now boosters are dependent on the brand. Some brands make boosters, other brands don't. So while this person may have had a brand that had boosters that you could add into the high lift, the brands that I work with don't. Typically, I have found that if you're needing to add an additional booster into the high lift color, then the high lift color doesn't work as well on its own. High lift already has additional boosters in them. That's what separates them from traditional hair color, is they've got extra ammonia in them to give them that extra lifting power. Most brands don't really have an extra booster that you add on to that. And when I asked the commenter what brand they used that was recommended to use a booster, they never responded. So now I'm really curious. So I want to ask everybody, if you use a brand of hair color that has high lift that requires additional boosters, please drop it for me in the comments, because I'm gonna test these out and see how well they work. Now, I wanna say that it had taken me several failed attempts of trying different brands out until I found a high lift that did get my hair past an orange color. At first, I thought high lift just didn't give enough lifting power to get me to a platinum blonde, but I was wrong. So I wanna recommend out there to everybody, if you try using high lift once or twice and you don't have good results, keep trying other brands, because Not all brands are created equally, and some will give you a lot more lift than others will. Okay, so number 4 is I thought you couldn't use 40 volume on the scalp. So if we were using bleach, you 100% would not want to use 40 volume on your scalp. This would be very bad and would likely burn your scalp and give you blisters and chemical burns. But high lift is actually meant to be used with 40 volume. If you're using high lift or even another traditional hair color, you can use up to 40 volume on your scalp. If you use a lower volume developer, you're not gonna see nearly as much lift as if you were to use 30 or 40 volume. So if you're looking for maximum lift, I definitely recommend following the directions from the manufacturer, which most of the time says you can use up to 40 volume developer. Okay, so number 5, will heat help my high lift lighten more levels? That's a bit of a tongue twister. So essentially, will putting your hair under a dryer or sitting out in the sun help your color get lighter than if you didn't? And this is a great question, and the answer is yes, it will. Heat will help to open up the cuticle or the outer layer of your hair, and so the high lift color molecules are able to get a little bit deeper in there to budge it a little bit more. And so because of this, if you're coloring more than just your new growth, oftentimes you'll end up with what we call hot roots, where the root of your hair lightens a little bit lighter than the rest of your hair. The reason for this is because of the heat coming off from your scalp. This is why we typically recommend getting a root touch-up done within 6 weeks, because if you push it past that 6 weeks mark, it can turn into a bit of a corrective color service, because then we have to do extra things in order to not wind up with a brassy band after your light root. Okay, so number 6. You should have applied to zone 2 first so that you didn't end up with an orange band. So again, this kind of tails off of what I was just talking about with the hot root. But something I want to point out is high lift is not bleach. So there are different rules involved when you're working with bleach and working with high lift. Now, high lift color processes and then it just stops processing. That's how all hair color works. It processes up to a certain time frame that's dependent on the brand, and then it just stops. Bleach doesn't quite work like that. While bleach will likely stop processing, it is more likely that bleach will continue processing the longer you leave it on. This is why bleach can fry your hair if you leave it on too long, and traditional hair color really won't. So with a really grown out bleach touch-up, let's say we have like 4 inches here that we need to lighten up. If we were using bleach, we would apply to zone 2 first, because that hair is going to need the extra time processing because the hair at the scalp will process quicker. Now, with high lift, it doesn't necessarily work like that, because the longer we leave it on isn't going to change the levels of lift that we get. So that's why when I was covering my really grown out roots, I applied it from the scalp all the way through zone 2. Now, there are a number of different things that you can do to avoid having any brassiness in there. And that's why, for one, I used foils, because foils will help to hold the heat in that area a little bit better. And another thing is to sit under the dryer or sit out in the sun, just so you're getting some extra heat to that hair. I also make sure that once I apply all of the color, I wrap my hair in a plastic cap, and then I wrap it in a towel turban just to hold the heat in a little bit more, and then I'll either sit under a dryer or out in the sun. And that extra heat can help to avoid having any brassy banding in there. But as you can see at this point, I normally just wait until the next time I color my hair to pull the high lift down, and that corrects any brassy bands. As you can see here, I don't have any brassy bands in my hair. Now, one other option that you can do to avoid having a hot root is to use a lower volume of developer at the root as you do for zone 2. So you can maybe use 30 volume on your root and then 40 volume on the rest. Now, the reason I didn't do this in my demonstration is because I didn't want to end up with a large brassy portion, and I'd rather wind up with the smallest brassy portion as possible. Okay, number 7. Can I use a toner on my hair after I use high lift? Now, the reason you might want to use a toner after you use high lift is if your hair didn't get quite as bright as you wanted and it's a little bit orangey still. And I want to say, yes, you can. So if your hair is naturally darker, or if you have a significant amount of hair that you need to lighten up, you may end up with a little bit of brass. As you saw in my video where I lightened up my grown out roots, I used a toner on that. Now, high lift color does have a toner built into it, but sometimes you just need a little bit more than what's built into it. A lot of times, especially if we're doing corrective color services, we will do something called a pre-tone before we tone the hair. And this is essentially correcting tones before we put on the shade that we want. So if we're trying to correct out red, the opposite color of red is green. So we're gonna put something with a very green base on the hair just to neutralize out the red. Then we can go in and add the shade that we are actually looking for. So that's why sometimes toning the hair after you've already done high lift can be a really great thing to get exactly the color you're looking for without too much warmth still in the hair. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if there's a shade in particular that you're looking for that's not exactly an option with your brand of high lift, you can then go back and add whatever toner you need to get your desired shade. Okay, the last one, number 8. Can I use high lift if I've been bleaching my hair platinum blonde? Now, the answer to this question is dependent on what your natural level is. If your natural level is a 6 or above, yes, you can. If it's a 5 or below, unfortunately, you might not be able to get to a platinum level in one session with high lift color. I am naturally a level 6 to 7, and as you can see, my hair is pretty platinum. I just colored my hair this past weekend using only high lift color. I didn't even tone it afterwards. Now, I am allergic to bleach to the point where I will go into an anaphylactic reaction if I get too much bleach on my scalp in particular. The pores in your scalp, I think, are a little bit bigger, so when it's all over my scalp, it just gets really absorbed into my bloodstream and I am unwell. And I have always been a blonde, so this was very difficult on me coloring my hair. I would put every single hair into a foil as close to my scalp as I could get it without it actually touching my scalp. I had several close calls and my mother thought I was absolutely insane. But this is my favorite hair color and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I had experimented with several different high lift colors, but I always still wound up with orange at my roots. But after a few years of struggle, I began experimenting with different brands, and that's when I realized that not all brands are created equally. Some brands high lift will give you 4 levels of lift, while others will give you 5. So I needed to find one that was advertising that it gave 5 levels of lift, and that's why I use Wella. Now, Wella is not sponsoring this video. I'm really just sharing my experience. I have not used bleach on my hair in almost 2 years. So if you can see here, my hair is very platinum. And since it's been so long, I don't even think there's really any bleach left on my ends. There might be a tiny bit in the back down here, but all of this hair that you're looking at is all been lightened with high lift. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful and answered some of your questions regarding high lift color and you have a better understanding of how it works. Make sure you subscribe if you want to make every day a good hair day. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys on the next one.